Class, welcome to week one of social psychology. Again, I'm your professor, Brother Salcido. Now, I wanted to definitely go over a lecture here on social psychology, kind of go over some of the basics of social psychology, research, ethics, research methods and ethics. It's important. This stuff is highlighted because, and it is on the first exam in week 3, first unit of the exam. It's not the only thing that's going to be in the exam, but it is highlighted in there. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that and just kind of go over some basic information here for you this week, okay? And the reason why I want to go over basic research methods is because a lot of this is missed in the tests usually, because some need a refresher or they've never really looked into some of the research methods and ethics that are out there, okay? So let's go ahead and get started here. Social psychology is definitely a science that studies how aspects of life influence us as people, you know. There's different things that come our way as humans, from childbirth all the way up to going to school, starting school at a young age, going to high school, college, missions, everything, marriage, where it actually influences how we think, it influences how we relate to others. So it's very important study because it shows us how we connect to the world. Figure 1 on page 2 actually has a really cool figure that actually kind of breaks it up on what is social psychology and how it is as a scientific practice. If you look here on the left-hand side under social thinking, it dives into that section of how we perceive ourselves and others, what we believe, our judgments, our attitudes, and even if we come from the same family and religious background, we're still going to have differences in how we think and what we believe in and that kind of stuff. So, and then there's the social influence, how it impacts us. There's culture, your pressures to conform. In fact, you'll learn a little bit how conformity isn't just always negative. There's actually a positive side to conformity. Persuasion, how groups of people influence us, and then how we relate to these things. Sometimes we're prejudiced. We don't like smokers. We don't like people to wear red shirts, whatever. All of us are prejudiced probably towards some aspect of life. And then, of course, helping, attraction, and all that's pretty much also part of that social psychology as a practice. Research. What is research? So a lot of students will say, well, I read a study on X, Y, Z, and it proves this. This is going to be factual. Well, research predicts results, okay? It suggests results. It doesn't actually give you facts. You can change the variables, you can manipulate the variables, and it can change the results. You can do a study in different areas of life, like you can go Atlanta, Georgia versus Salt Lake City. You can go small town Arizona versus small town Nebraska. You're going to get 2 different results. Okay, so if you did a study in video game and violence, influencing violence, if you do a study in a rich part of the neighborhood, you're going to have results where you're not going to see it. But if you do it in the ghetto, some city in the poor area, you're probably going to see more chances of violence. But does that mean that that's the result of video games and violent video games and movies? Maybe so, it influences, but you're going to see different results, basically. And by the way, I don't let my kids play those video games or watch those kind of movies. So I'm not in favor of it, whether it does do the act of making them go out and do violent things. It's still not good for the mind. There's also generation differences too. So that's why when you do research, you need to find something that's been done in the last 5 to 10 years. Some of your professors will tell you 5 years because anything past that or even past 10 years is not going to be relevant. Think about a study of narcissism in the 1990s compared to today. The levels of narcissism are different and higher today because you got social media. We didn't have that in the 90s. So you have to be very careful on where and when you pull a study. So just remember that when you look at research, you got to look at it as, is it factual or is it suggestion results? In the debate with the masks, do they work? I see studies, people have been showing me studies that they work and they help, and then there's studies that show they don't help. So it just depends on the variables and where it's at. The two types of different studies to actually look at are experimental versus correlation, because these two are basically the ones you see a lot when you do your college assignments. When you have your research assignment that's due, I think in week 5, it's the first time it's due, you're not going to find a correlation study. You're going to do experimental. Okay, so don't ever use a correlation study in this class. They're good to look at and good to read, and trust me, I do read them, but assignments in this class, no correlation studies. And let's dive into what they are. Some of you may have already know what these are, so this might be a refresher, but one of the reasons why I'm going through this is because some of these are the most common missed questions on first exam in week 3 as well. Okay, so first off, in experimental studies, researchers test hypothesis. They make a prediction. They say, we predict that this pill will cure headaches. Okay, that's their prediction. There's also something called the null hypothesis, which I don't really go over too much, but it's basically the negative part of it, that this pill will not cure headaches. I don't know the gist, that's just the gist of what I know about it. Also in experimental studies, there's an independent, dependent variable, okay? This is what a lot of students miss as well. Remember, independent variable manipulates something. Dependent variable is what is the actual behavior as a result of the independent variable. So for instance, like in a drug trial, did this pill cure headaches? So the pill would be the independent variable because it's what's trying to be the manipulating variable, and the dependent variable would be, did it cure headaches? Not necessarily participants per se, but did it cure their headaches? Okay, that would be the dependent variable. So you're looking for cause and effect with experimental studies. Okay, did the independent variable cause a reaction? All right, and so that's the best way I can explain experimental studies, by using drug trials. Actually, they're easier to kind of understand. Correlation studies, they're non-experimental. There's no independent dependent variable. There's no cause and effect. They just make predictions. That's it. And they also give relationships between variables. Is it a strong relationship versus a weak relationship? And the interesting thing about correlation studies is a lot of researchers will use them to do experimental studies. So they'll be like, hey, there's a correlation between this pill and headaches. Now let's go do an experimental study. Okay. An example of a correlation study, I took it out of the book so you can go and read it. Okay, so you have access to it. There's one in there about wealth versus health. All right. There was a correlation study done where researchers found that wealthier people live longer than poor people. Why is that? Well, could it be that wealthier people have just better health? Or do wealthy people have access to better health? So perhaps healthier people have more time to be wealthy. So if they're healthy, they're motivated, they're doing well physiologically, so maybe they're more successful. So there's no way to really know why, but all we know is that there's a correlation between wealth and health. Wealthier people live longer, poor people live less. Okay, so that's one example of a correlation study. Okay. And like I said, all we know is that it predicts a relationship. Cannot explain how it does it. Now, when we dive into sampling methods, this is something that's also missed on the exams from time to time, because a lot of students don't spend a lot of time with research terminology and definitions and stuff like that. So when sampling methods, there's two different kinds, and I'll just go ahead and put them up here. There's random sampling and random assignment. Okay, random sampling means you're taking a group of people out of a larger population that's going to be representative of what you're doing for the study. So again, we'll use the headache study. That means if there's 10,000 people that have headaches, you're going to find 100 of those people and you're going to pull them aside to do a research study. Okay. Now, if you find just random 10,000 people and you're not really saying whether you care if they have headaches or not, then you're not getting a population representative of people with headaches. You make sure you find what the population is, tie it down. Let's say you found 10,000 that have headaches. Okay, research says we can pull out 100. So let's do it. Now, in some experimental studies, you can have a control group and experimental group. It doesn't necessarily have to be the case, okay? So you don't have to necessarily have one or the other. It could just be, does the independent variable cause a reaction, okay? So you don't really have to have that. But if you do have an experimental one where there's a control group and an experimental group, you're going to do what's called randomly assign. So the experimental group gets the drug, the control group gets the placebo. Now it minimizes difference, so that's key. Random assignment minimizes differences, and the way it's minimized is you take the 100 participants of the population, you take the 100 from the sampling, and you just randomly say 50 goes here to the control group, 50 goes here to the experimental group. You're not looking at height, weight, gender, you're not looking at anything. You're just saying, we all have headaches, 50 go here, 50 go there, okay? Just randomly assign. Ethics, huge. Ethics is major. Over the years, we've seen, if you go back in 1950s and 60s, you'll see experiments like the Stanford Prison Experiment. You'll see Milgram's manipulation experiment. You'll see all sorts of different experiments where they impacted the participants negatively and caused post-traumatic distress disorders, so PTSD. So you'll see that there's an ethical guideline to all this. But some of the other information that's kind of goes along with it is the test, does the study have to have mundane realism or experimental realism? So there's a difference between the two. So mundane realism just means that the situation is similar to the known. So does an experimental study have to be known and common and be a part of everyday behavior? No, it does not. You know, you can catch the participants off guard in some ways where the experiment is testing your true knowledge of something, and that's okay. It just can't hurt them or cause stress. The actual, so if it's low on mundane realism, that's okay. Sometimes it could be high on mundane realism, which means that the experiment is actually something that is real to them, that they've already experienced it before. It's easy to know what the experiment is going to be about because they are familiarized with what the study is representing. But we definitely want the study to be and have really good positive experimental realism. The study is real. There's no manipulating. There's no fixing the environment up. It's real. It's a real study. Okay, it drives real psychological process of the mind. Part of ethics, which is important, there's no deception at all. You cannot deceive. Researcher cannot deceive the participants at all in any way, shape, or form. And this is done by coercion, intimidation, or deception. You cannot coerce an answer. So when you see these studies on TV, especially whether they come from regular basic commercials or political polls or anything that you see with research, a lot of times people don't ask themselves, what was the questionnaire given? So sometimes, you know, somebody could ask a question in a study that's basic, like, why don't you like Diet Coke? That's leading, that's kind of deceiving, coercing this participant to believe that they don't like Diet Coke, and maybe they do. The actual question would be, tell me your thoughts about Diet Coke. So it's an open-ended, not positive, not negative. It's a question asked, it's not going to lead. And so therefore you cannot ask, what do you like about Diet Coke? You have to just ask the open-ended question, whether it's a face-to-face interview or whether it's a questionnaire that's open-ended, that gives a participant a chance to give their true thoughts. And of course, you can't intimidate. There's no way, you can't punish somebody. You know, like sometimes a study will say you can get a $50 gift card to Amazon if you participate. Well, if you don't get the answers you want, you can't tell the participant you're not going to get your $50 gift card. You know, that's against ethical guidelines. Okay. Demand characteristic, this is also a huge one. Students kind of miss a little bit on the exam as well. But basically, demand characteristics is the researcher getting up there and basically with their voice tone, body language, implicitly demanding a certain type of answer and giving some kind of direction on what they're looking for in the study that actually will influence or force a participant to feel they have to answer to please the researcher who's conducting the research. So that's something that is a big problem with ethics. Now with ethical guidelines, this is just something that's just for your knowledge here. There's something called the Institutional Review Board, IRB. If you haven't heard it before, it's always referred to IRB. You know, you got to get that passed through IRB if you're trying to do research. It's a panel approval. So the researcher, the IRB will look at the research, make sure that the study's legit, that there's citations and studies that back up why the study needs to be done, cannot just be on a whim. They have to make sure that the methodology and the intent is going to yield results accurately. So if I have a questionnaire, I have to make sure, if I'm going to do an open-ended, actually, if I have a questionnaire, I have to make sure that the questions on there are not misleading, misguiding, that they're accurately going to give me the answers that I need ethically to get results for the study. If I'm doing an open dialogue with somebody, if I'm doing a face-to-face interview, I have to make sure that the questions asked are legit, that they're going to yield verbal results, okay? And the IRB protects participants. Milgram's experiment was where a participant came in, and if somebody on the other side of the wall gave the wrong answer, the participant pressed the button to shock the person on the other side of the wall. Now, if you remember that study, now in that study, the person on the other side of the wall was faking, but the participant didn't know. They were just pressing the button. So to shock the person on the other side of the wall if they got a wrong answer. Well, that caused PTSD because the shocks kept getting stronger and stronger, and the person on the other side of the wall kept getting louder and sounded more like they were suffering anguishly. So it caused PTSD on the participants' part because they thought they were truly hurting somebody when they weren't. So IRB protects participants from that. They also protect them from being anonymous, confidentiality. So when I was doing my dissertation on nurses in acute care hospitals in Phoenix, Arizona, I had to make sure that I would never use their name, never divulge their name, never talk about who they are, what they do, what hospital they work for. Only I have that information, and then I destroy that information 3 to 5 years later. Okay, when the time is up, usually it's about 3 years for a study, 3 to 5 years. But yeah, you got to make sure that they're kept secret. Participants can leave at any time. Okay, so even at the end, the participants can say, hey, I know I gave you all this information. I want out, don't use it. They can do that. They can do it in the middle of the study. It's okay. They can leave at any time, no repercussions and no ill feelings. Okay, so that's the interesting thing. And one of the things about research is you just want the communication to be honest, you know, and you want to be upfront. This is what we're using the information for. I'm the only one that's going to know what's going to be written. No one's going to know it's you. And then you debrief each participant, make sure they know, here's what you said, here's the answers. Does this depict your thoughts and feelings? That's important too. And that's pretty much it right there for this first lecture. This information, like I said, some of it definitely does relate to the exam and some of the missed concepts that are usually missed. Also, some of this is for your information too, to educate you or refresh your mind if you knew this stuff before. So if you have any questions about any of this, please let me know. I'm definitely here to help out in any way I possibly can. Good luck.